So, I want to thank everybody for coming today, but I'm Marc Straus. Olivia and I founded Hudson Valley MOCA, and now 16 years later, it's thrilling to see what happened to this town. I just want to tell one little story because it's emblematic, I think, of what this institution has accomplished. Olivia told me, I don't know if it was 2 weeks ago, that she got a call from a 26-year-old man who said, Olivia, I want to let you know I'll be going to Caltech for my PhD in physics and philosophy. And then he said, you know, if I didn't take your class here as an 11-year-old, I probably wouldn't have gone to college. And I think it's thrilling. And I think that using art like this as a vehicle to educate and understand the power of the imaginative process is essential in education. In putting together this exhibition of our collection, we reached out to two curators who we feel very close to. And we'll talk a little bit about it. Omar, we know both of you almost the same as much time. We met probably in 2008. We had an interest, we were focused at that moment on East European new artists. And then I met somebody who knew everything, absolutely everything. And at 22, he was editor in the US of Flash Art. And now he's in Israel. That's got to be interesting. And then Omar, I've never known anybody who knows everything about art. And he's the one who, I opened the gallery. I really went on the dark side. I opened a gallery a little over 8 years ago on the Lower East Side. He encouraged me to show Jeffrey Gibson's first work in Miami. You encouraged me to show Jung-Oh, and I thought, no one's going to get it. You said they will, and you were right. So these relationships go on. I want to keep it open-ended, and we kind of talk and ask each other questions, and then open it to the audience. And I want to talk to them first. They've each curated some very important things in their career. I wanted to ask each of them how this experience may have differed, and tell us about the experience of curating this show.
Well, thank you. I don't know, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay, thank you for being here. My voice is a little bit, I've been traveling a lot lately, so being in the plane and change the weather and all of that. I apologize for my voice not being. This has been a really great experience. I'm going to start with that. I've been working with Nicola, of course. It was a great back and forth conversation, and the beauty of the time we live, or how we live now, which is the title of the exhibition, How We Live, is that we can communicate. We can communicate to make something happen. And we did without having physical contact. I mean, this was all about conversations. And eventually we make physical contact. We're here now, but things can really happen. But there has to be a common ground, and the common ground, it is physical. It is a physical thing. It's how we live, or how we exist. I started out curating in the not-for-profit sector. So I started out as an artist in New York back in the early mid-90s, and then somehow I made it into curating, and I worked in a good number of not-for-profits and artists run spaces in New York. So I established perhaps because I started out as an artist, I established very close relationship with artists, and I sort of kind of spoke the same language somehow. So somehow I can sense a little bit of an artist and what they're trying to sort of communicate, and when Marc referred to those two artists, I guess I felt something about them, and I stood for it. And I was like, I could be wrong, because life makes interruptions, and even a good intention that an artist has, you know, things happen that they might go here or there, but the essence will always be there. And eventually I started working in the for-profit, which is, I'm the artistic director of an art fair, and but I still do shows independently. And when Marc asked me to do this, I was so excited, because I had an opportunity to work with works that I only dream of, and that I saw as a reference when I was still a student. I remember looking at an image of Robert Gover's Sink, which we have here today, and I was like, wow, this is something beyond everything. I mean, to me, this was something that, at that time, it was only something that I could sort of dream of seeing in a major museum, in a major show. I had no idea who owned the piece. and at the time, I just didn't know many collectors. I mean, I knew there were collections, but they weren't private. So to have somebody like Marc and Livia, who are so committed to collecting, but not only collecting, to sharing what they collect, and to taking risks, huge risks, because most of these works, I'm sure, Nicola, when you get to talk, you'll probably say something about that too, but most of these works, I was like, they're not going to be able to bring this to the exhibition space, because I went to their home in New York, and I was like, oh, it would be great to have this. And the boss said, it is really hard to move. It is really hard to transport, but let's see what we can do. And I was like, if they come back to me and say we couldn't do it, I understand. Because not only that it is hard to move, but it's also very fragile. But it's also sharing and making something that they have public. And that's the idea. I think collecting also means eventually needs to become a part of the public domain. It has to become accessible to people. And to me, that was so exciting to be able to be invited. When Marc approached me, it was an art fair. I remember it was at the Armory show. And I didn't even have to think about it. Normally, when people ask me to do a show here and there, being a not-for-profit or even an artist, I have artists approaching me and I think about it, but I give it some thought. I'm like, hey, yeah, let's talk, let's meet again. When Marc asked me, I was like, yes, of course, you know, how can I say no? I was so flattered and so happy that you asked me, because I don't work for institutions. I'm an independent curator. I don't have access to these works. I mean, I have asked for loans through collectors, but I usually get a small piece or a piece that is not sold that you can, you know, that's why my focus is mid-career, younger artists, or older artists that are still not that well known, because I can work with them and have them install a large work. But to have this kind of work was just, I mean, I just couldn't think of a better possibility. So now I'm going to pass it to you and let you talk about that your experience.
Thank you so much for coming first, and thank you, Livia and Marc and Omar. I mean, it's my second show with this institution, and I hope it's not the last.
Well, it depends.
No, this is, of course. But to really plug into the conversation, I mean, I feel similarly to Omar. I work for an institution, but it's a non-collecting institution. So it's called CCA, Center for Contemporary Art Tel Aviv, and we actually mostly work on commissions and production of artists that are living artists, mostly at the beginning of their path as artists. So again, I really, for me, this is such an interesting way to complement my work with artists that is mostly very, based on dialogue and, to work on something that didn't exist before that is going to be produced for a show. So in a way, and again, I'm not saying this as something I prefer over working with an existing collection. Quite the opposite. I think to have the privilege to do both in two different contexts, such as what I do in Tel Aviv and what I've done here with the show I was involved with before, and this one, for me, it's really so unique. And in addition, there's something, I think it's really connected to my relationship with Livia and Marc. When I moved to New York, I lived in New York 7 years before moving to Tel Aviv. I'm from Italy originally, so I moved to New York in 2007 and I lived until 2014. Then I moved to Israel for work. But coming from Italy, which is a place that has a lot of art, as you know, and also quite some good places for contemporary art, but the access to private collections, it's very, very, very scarce. You have great collectors in Italy. I mean, I'm sure Marc knows them. I mean, we all know. I mean, Panza, who gave the collection to the Guggenheim. I mean, you have few names, but this idea of sharing or showing or make accessible to what an individual has, this is not something that is so common in Italy. And also it's connected to, the point I was in my life in the field of art. So when I moved here, to me, somebody like Marc and Livia would say, come to our house and we'll have coffee and we discussed a lot because we had this common passion, but then this was just an excuse. We started to talk about art and me, I really wanted to learn. So in short, for me, it was a unique encounter, a physical encounter with a work of art in a domestic space, with people that own it, live with it, talk about it. Oh, it's broken, oh my God, I need to fix it, I need to move it, but this next to this, but these are things that I want to spoil your next question, but not even the MoMA has. If you are a curator at the MoMA, you don't have this connection to artworks, because you are an employee in a place and there was somebody before you, there was somebody after you, and the works below. This is so different. So I think for this show, when Marc and Livia approached me, I said, okay, this time, because the previous show, we're not going to talk about it, but it was different way of working. For this show, I said to myself, I'm going to be emotional all the way, and even my essay in the catalog is it's a letter I wrote to the two of them. I really want, because it's really, this is what makes such operations or missions, I don't know how you call your life in the art as collectors, or a life, a life choice. This makes it very different. So, and I'm not even starting with the, collector that buy when, it's already, and, you know, Marc and Livia are different. They really go, you know, to very early, and they, you know, that's what Omar was saying. It's not only about the work itself. When was bought, where was bought, why was bought. I mean, it's history. It's like a lot of story, and it's all connected to individuals. And this for me is very, very special, especially if the individuals are there to talk to you, as I was fortunate enough to, you know, to have the chance. So.
Well, MoMA is about to open a 166,000 square foot exhibition space. They did, in fact, borrow at different times a couple of these pieces.
Sure.
There is a piece here that comes in 2 parts. We came to the artist retrospective. They had 2 pieces separated. I almost fainted. But, I mean, you two were given access to the collection. There was a central theme, and was sculpture and video, because so that really narrows it down right away. But the idea was, we hope that work that we came into contact with really international artists, a lot of our travels, that moved us emotionally. There was something we felt keenly that we learned, something that we wanted in our space. But I want to ask both of you, in going through the list, and I have to call out Emma Reinhardt, who's been here all summer, who helped all of us through every step. But still, this is a show where you said yes and no, and yes and no. I know all the no's. And, and if an artist is here like Tammy, it was a yes. So tell us about, a little bit about how you do it. I hope we mostly got out of your way. There was one piece not here, I was astonished. I don't even want to talk about it. But that was your right. So tell us, I mean, you guys are really very important curators in my mind. What was that balance? I'll start with you this time. What were you seeing that the selection process had to happen?
First, I mean, it's true that it's sculptures and videos, but we all know that with art, you can show something that is visually a sculpture, but actually think of itself as a painting, and you have a video that is a video, you see, but it's actually a sculpture. I mean, this, I like to think that the moment we try to frame artworks, whether through medium or ideas or context, or they always escape. So this, I really feel it's important to say. As for the process, I mean, Omar was already anticipating, saying it was like a kind of like a crazy exchange between you know, 3 different cities and people traveling, and Emma was helping us accessing the works, because, you know, this is like it's a museum storage that you need to go in. But for me, it was very interesting way to reflect really about the developments in contemporary art in the last 40, 50 years. I mean, it goes even a little bit back, because we have an Oldenburg on the corner, so we go. But let's say these are few exceptions with Dan Flavin and Oldenburg, but let's say, and I really, it was for me a way to reflect on this idea of artworks, but not only artworks, because I really have a ecosystemic understanding of art, which means that I do not believe, I mean, artists are really the engine, but all the other players go with it, the galleries, the collector, the critic, the curator. So for me, this show was a very interesting way to understand how artists at some point really decided to, even though you have monumental works, but to really go through a way of not only making art, but also presenting art that is a little bit more intimate, a little bit less larger than life for its sake, a little bit, I don't know how many of you go often to New York or to other places, but you saw galleries opening spaces that are smaller. And I don't want to always say, it's the market, because it's one aspect, I think. And if I want to say a name in the show that really for me, I really insisted, and for me is a very key figure, is Michael E. Smith, who has two works in the show: the shoes on the wall and the red box with the yes, with the spring. So for me this was a way, and of course I didn't want it to, I did not like this idea of like having an idea and like, you know, we are not Talibans, but to have, like, to really build a line, and then a line that is full of exceptions and full of mistakes, but there is a line in this, and in a way it really reflects what I just said about this idea of intimacy. I mean, Mark and Livia, they like to live with this huge Nanjing Pike. I mean, it's like, this is, you know, you need to measure the roof in order to have it, and I'm not going to say the rest they have in this living room. I mean, you can actually see in the catalog, but this is light compared to others. So, but it's all connected to, and this was the way for me, and in addition, I must say, since I have this job with Tel Aviv for 2 years, I do shows alone. I barely never curated a show by myself, because I really enjoy the conversation, and I do not believe that art today can be encapsulated by an individual. Like, it's impossible, geographically speaking, in terms of time, medium, like it's, so for me to be in this pool of, and sometimes it was not easy because, you know, with the difference of time and the emails and, you know, the whole, but in the end it was very, you know, it's great when you can, you know that your territory ends when the other start, and it's all about this, you know, as if borders are ropes that we can move all the time, you know. So this, I felt it was, I was moving the rope this way and Omar was moving this way, and then Marc came and did like, you know, I won't go into details. No, actually it was very collaborative. I was the one when Omar would say, yeah, how are we gonna get this? I was the one, I want this, and Marc, this too big. No, I want the one, because I'm far away, so I couldn't pick up the phone and say what. I did it remotely, so I could push. But again, it was very, it was interesting format, and I totally, really, it's something I didn't think about until now, but it's totally amazing that you can really do, being like in Tel Aviv and Miami. I mean, Omar travels much more than me, so Miami or all New York or everywhere. And Marc, I mean, it was really, it's very, very, very interesting, and I think it's so nice that no one really can say it's my show 100%. And you know, it's a good way of dealing with this, because it's already so complex.
So tell us about the selection process.
Well, I have to say I agree a lot with Nicola. It was, I also do a lot of co-curation, and I love the collaborative element, because it's not about one voice, it's about multiple voices. And when Marc told me that I was going to be co-curating with Nicola, I was really excited, because I didn't have to think about a co-curator, or the co-curator didn't have to think about a co-curator, but here you brought us together, and I already had some kind of connection to Nicola, to mutual friend, so and I know his work, and I was, okay, I'm sure we're going to overlap on a lot of the things because of his vision and what I think I do. I'm not sure what I do yet, but because we just don't know. And you know, every day is different, every month is different, every year is different. And no matter how old or how much experience you have, you're always growing. But making the selections, I know I didn't want it because I come from working most of the time with very low budget situations. I don't have a 100,000, 300,000 budget for a show most of the time. So I was a little worried about the technical part of moving pieces, how much it was going to cost and all of that. So I was thinking that, okay, if we don't have that huge work, perhaps a smaller work like Michael E. Smith, that even though it's a small, it's powerful. It has that kind of power. And I agree with you. We actually agree with that artist. We both selected it. I think he's a strong artist. I saw a piece at the Venice Biennale, this past Venice Biennale, and I took, I think, 5 pictures of the whole Biennale.
These are better.
Oh, these are better. But the one that I took, one of the 5 pictures was Michael E. Smith,
Right.
which was the 2 plastic chairs with the hair or the whatever. I thought that that piece was so powerful. And in this Venice Biennale, the show was actually good. It was really good. It was well curated. There were monumental pieces. Yet, one of the pieces that I personally took a picture of was this piece. That was very simple. It was just 2 plastic chairs with, to me, it resonated for some reason. And I think that's what art does. But making the selection was really, in some ways it was really easy because we actually agree on most of it except for the fact that, yeah, I have to be honest, I'm not into, and you have the best work I've seen, like artists like Demian. That's not my focus because my practice has always been very much connected to the fluxes, to things that are more about ideas and less about materiality and monumentality. So I like this idea of the things that just happen and disappear. It's more connected to, yeah, to fluxes. So for me, even though Damien Hirst is an important artist and you bought him when he was really significant, and he still is, no, he still is, but his earlier work, and I can see that it's a gorgeous piece, and it wouldn't occupy an important place here, but I was okay with not necessarily, you know, having that. But
I
yeah.
think it was also, I think speaking of Damien Hirst, I think it was also, both of us, we really felt that there are some great art that is also deeply cynical, and we are fine with that. You know, I'm totally, you know, there are some pieces that are so, or let's say, with the, you know, they kind of put you in an, and I think with the selection we really wanted to go on a different road. Not that, you know, and I think Damien Hirst, even though, as we said, is a great artist, but there is something really, you know, quite different.
So you gravitated, both of you, on balance. And we had work in the show from 2017, 18, and even 19. If I looked a little bit from the outside, you gravitated more towards newer selections, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah, right?
I have to say thank you for including Oliver, because I personally was like, okay, Oliver is 1961, the piece was from 1961, and it's major. But at the time I didn't see it, and thanks for now I understand why you included it, because conceptually it really ties the show together. And I appreciate that, because sometimes when you're working on your own, you don't see certain things. And now I do see it as a very important key piece in the show, but at first I didn't see it. But what I was trying to get to was not to have a very diverse. I lean a little bit towards Brazil because I'm Latin American, I'm Cuban American, so I have some better understanding of what's happening in that region, and I understand Brazil a little bit, and I was like, oh, I can't believe Marc has worked by this artist, and recently acquired. So you
Paolo Nazareth?
Paolo Nazareth, which is, I think, it's very interesting artist, and also Sonia.
So they should know what it is.
Sonia Gomez.
Sonia Gomez.
So, Paolo.
Perhaps you can tell us how you got there. How did you get to Brazil? You know, that'd be
We
interesting.
go a lot of places.
I know.
But I just want to, so you know what piece they're talking about. They chose only 3 artists in the show with more than one piece. He was one, and Mike Brown was another. And Libby and I were in Brazil. We were in Argentina as well. We were invited to Brazil to lecture about collecting art. That was pretty cool. But we saw his work there, and this is a block of clear acrylic, and inside are 2 everyday objects. One is a box of Aunt Jemima flour, and then Uncle Ben's rice. And I guess what struck us so deeply, with all the conversation about these issues today, I was thinking, my God, we're still buying this stuff. And we're going with something on the shelf as a character in blackface, for God's sakes. And this young, itinerant Brazilian artist who goes around the world and makes this stuff, he got it. I mean, he showed this to us in a way that I haven't seen before. And for us, that was almost a sine qua non of what we had to take. I mean, here's a 20-second loop. The artist, that's her son when he was 2. I think he's now 24. But, you know, this is a really charged, provocative piece. And forget that I was a lung cancer doctor, so I don't know if there was any overlap. So, what kind of questions do you guys want to open up?
I want you to talk a little bit more, because I like the way you sort of...
It's that Italian accent.
Yeah. Between the Cuban accent and the Italian accent, I hope you understand what we try to get to. Yeah.
About what you...
His second question about...
What was it?
Oh, I forgot.
No, I think in...
Process of selection. Process of selection.
Yes,
Yeah,
the process of selection.
Yeah,
I actually don't know. Me, I really, I try to set rules to myself in order to break them, and I don't know. I mean, Marc, you say that we were selecting a lot of like new acquisitions, and I'm not sure. I think about Janine Antoni, and I think about Gober, and there's an Aschwager. I mean, I don't have the numbers, you know. I don't know like how many women, how many men, how many old, how many also old.
We didn't
do
that.
You know, like
No.
who is old? That's a big question, especially in the art. I mean,
Yeah.
so, but I do want to say this is something it's very important. It connects to things I already said before. But when I said that I was emotional with this show, also the selection, because you know, I mean, really the reason I begged Marc to get the Nanjing Pike was that I really have vivid memories of visiting Lily and Marc in Chappaqua. And to encounter this work, and it's not, you know, you don't get to see this kind of Nanjing Pike so easily. It's, you know, it's like meeting an alien actually, really. Something you have seen or you have heard of, and then this creature is there for you. And it was important that this piece would be in the show because it manifested this kind of intimacy that was connected to an encounter. Same with the Shenzhen. We have a beautiful Shenzhen if you enter to the right. And when I saw this piece in the slide, I said I saw it in Venice when I was 16 with my sister. This was like a full room, the first Venice biennial I saw in my life. And I remember this piece, this is an element, it was a full room with this furniture turned into drums, and it was played. I didn't go to the, I mean, you know, I was just somebody going, but so they were played, and this for me was also, I mean, it's a beautiful piece. I don't need this story to convince you that it should be selected. But because I wanted this drive in the way the show was going to be built, then, you know, it became so, and I think this is again something that we can afford and we have the luxury only in places like this one when you deal with private collection. Because when you are in an institution, I mean, I also don't have, like Omar, a track. I worked with as an independent curator before, and now I run an institution. But as I told you before, it's first non-collecting, and second really, really small. We're very small, and we don't have. But I imagine that a curator in a big institution cannot do a show and say, yeah, because I saw it when I was 16. I mean, you have this whole pressure from the institution that you need to be intellectual and articulate, and I get it and I agree. But thank God we have a place like this where we can be different. And again, nothing is better. Just they should all be there. Because art is also about this. It's not only about intellect and articulation and, you know, like changing history, blah, blah, blah. Especially when you speak to artists.
So from our side, we can have a lot of room for questions. Yeah, Libby and I were so personally close to every piece you looked at. I mean, we know the moment we saw every piece, you know, because the piece became important to us. So everyone you didn't take hurt. and I just kept thinking we're never going to move that Shenzhen. It's never going to happen. I mean, it is so difficult. But I think you guys did a great job. It's so important to us as collectors, especially in a show like this, that we give you room to interpret. And I think that's what happened. We're going to have plenty of room for questions unless you guys have other questions. No? Tammy?
I was just curious about the process of selection because Olivia, you have such a large painting collection. So I was just curious, you know, just on a personal level, why that choice for video and sculpture?
Oh, that's a good question. I mean, Libby is probably going to have a different answer, which is cool. But I don't think I have such a big painting collection. I mean, I don't even think I have such a big collection. But, I know that's in a way naive, but it's partly because we really engaged every single piece. I mean, every single piece in this show, and I'll come to your question, we looked at about everything the artist did. I mean, you know, the first time I met you, and you were dark, concrete studio, and I go in there, and I'm one of the people trying to pick art for a show from graduates in Columbia. There's nobody in the room. And then I see this video, and oh my God, this thing is so silly, but I love it. I can't understand why I'm getting to care about it. And then I look around, I see there's somebody sitting in the back. My first question to you was, I want to see everything you've done, right? And that was the first time we met. I saw this, I need to see everything. Robert Gober is the third sink he ever made, and I know all of them. And so, for us, you know, sometimes maybe this is a bit of, you know, the scientist in me. I wanted to create some real restrictions and boundaries. I wanted not to have an open-ended show from the collection. And Libby and I saw a larger relationship between video and sculpture. And, you know, to us, between the 6 videos they chose and the sculpture. And I think part of it is about restriction. It's about, you know, don't have access to the whole collection. We're looking at only sculpture and video. Even more restricted, it's thematic. That has to do with things where artists engaged us culturally, as that does. So that was my thinking. Other questions?
You know, well, maybe
You want a microphone?
Omar, no. No, Omar and Nicola, maybe, I don't remember you raising the issue of how about paintings, so.
Can I?
Yeah, sure.
Yeah. No. I think this was more challenging in the sense of, and I even told Mark today when I walked in, and I said, Mark, your next show needs to be about painting, because I don't think you want to go through all of this again. And so soon, maybe wait a year or 2 or 3 through this whole process of. I mean, this is more challenging to do than, I'm not saying painting is not important, this is really important, but it's easier to install, it's easier to transport, this becomes a little bit more complex. So, I was like, I like challenges, Livia, I do, I don't know how you feel.
I also think that we're collectors who never had an outdoor collection. And I can't even give you all the reasons to do it properly, like some of our friends who never had that ability. We started collecting art when we were in a one-room medical school dormitory. And there was a piece, well, we didn't have furniture. There was a piece that we wanted to get very badly, and it weighed 4,000 pounds. Like, I was, no, 6,000. I was going to do it, but it was impossible to get it in the dormitory. Impossible. And I don't want to buy something we're not going to live with. To my recollection, we never bought anything that went directly to storage. So we began to learn as collectors early, that we were a little unusual that we would commit to indoor sculpture the way we have. And a large number of these pieces, there was famous gallery dealer. I came in and I said, there's a piece I know you have, and I don't know if I could go home and not buy it. Libby loves it so much that I think I'm going to have to get it, and frankly, it won't fit through the door of my house. And he said, you know, I was thinking about who would be crazy enough to buy this piece. And I was really truthful from the gallery. And we bought it, and it was in our garage 2.5 years. I mean, this is nuts. So I think that a large number of these works, the truth is there weren't many buyers for any of this. And part of it was, you know, these objects indoors. Indoor sculpture was just hardly ever in fashion. And you can't imagine owning light bulbs and what people said about it 40 years ago. I mean, it's painting, and yeah, we own enough. I guess we'll buy more. But painting is so accessible, and everybody knows it. And despite on and off years of everybody telling us painting is dead, it isn't, and it won't be. And I think that emotionally, on average, the sculpture was more challenging for us. It moved us emotionally more.
I mean, actually, I do see a very clear reason not to have painting, although actually painting is also how we met, the three of us. I mean, these artists from Romania, they were actually known for being painters, and I have myself some history with doing actually painting shows, and I was just talking, me and Tani, we had the train together, so we were just talking, and I said to her, I mean, this whole idea of medium, like understanding of art through a medium, for me it's very hard. I mean, I really do not. The place where I work has a strong history in video for 20 years, and you know, first shows I did, there was no video, because, I mean, I just like, but I think if you try to twist a bit the idea of sculpture and you think about what you see here as domestic objects, which most of them are actually. If you look at how these works are made, you have spoons and light and neon lights, and you have ropes and plastic things that you would find in the house. You really, I think, when Marc went for sculpture, I mean, I totally understand and agree with what he said until now, but maybe there's even a further choice that painting brings us immediately in a different reality. And I think this show wanted to be a lot about reality, how we live, like what we, you know, painting really take us, whether it's Ellsworth Kelly or I don't know, figurative, you know, painting but they take us somewhere else, and we wanted to stay here. You know, we wanted, and really some of the works can do, you know, Rachel Harrison with the honey bears, and you can really see in so many of them the connection to the chair. You have chairs here, you have mapping, things to map the floor. You really have, and this, it's, I mean, we can talk about the ready-made, not today, but this is why I think objects, and that's why I want to say objects, I don't want to say sculpture, because then sculpture, we can speak about the David of Michelangelo. We are not there. It's a different story. It's how art at some point came into the kitchen, and that's why I think Oldenburg is so relevant, because like if there's something he did, that's what he did. Like, let's talk to the mice, you know. Let's talked to the mice, and you didn't say the rats. Okay, but that's it. So.
No, that's a really good point, the domestic space. I mean, if you look at the show, it really brings you to that, to domesticity. In many ways, most of the works in the show are connected to that, to the sense of,
Yeah.
And I think we were very aware of that when we were discussing.
Yeah, for sure. I think domesticity was a word that was
Okay,
brought up several
times.
times.
Yeah.
Well, I think about one example, and almost all are good examples for us, but the bourgeois, Libby and I went to see Louise a few times, and she had a lot to do with being able to get this piece. She made it happen. But we came to her after the piece toured a lot, and came back a little bit unwound. And, okay, Louise, what do we do? No, just get somebody to do this. She said, don't clean it. And I said, okay, why? She said, it's my life. She said that pin was my childhood pin. She said, these schools, when I moved as a young woman to the United States, got my first studio, it had been a thread factory. So these are 120-year-old schools, and don't clean them. And I think, that kind of engagement that we had, that it represented part of her life. Another question?
I do, which you've touched upon answering. Basically, the title intrigued me immediately, but I interpreted it in terms of how we all live, and I thought of it more as a social construct. But then remembering that this is from your collection, and knowing that you live with your art, that other resonance of how you and Livia and your family have lived with these objects is really powerful and meaningful. But I wanted to know from the curators, how early on was that theme? I know you were told media-wise it's going to be sculpture, it's going to be video. How early on were you given that theme?
It was from the start, from the beginning, but it's, exactly as you said, with such word, with such sentence, the possibility of interpretation are multiples.
But also we need to think that this is also a global way of how we live. I mean, we're referring to a much global.
The show has several. There are artists from many countries. I mean, with Marc and Livia's collection, you could totally. I think they got early on. Is also how we met and how we have established our friendship. But because they travel everywhere, they go, to places I don't even go, and they're unstoppable. But we could totally do a show from their collection only with Americans and Europeans.
Everything connects, so I mean, we know.
This was actually
socially, things are connected.
It wasn't a real discussion, but we both, I think it's part of our biography, or we went immediately for Brazilian, Malaysians, I mean Africans. I mean, we wanted to. I think it's also. I mean, I think it's so nice that they had the catalog of the previous show. That is irrelevant. And I must say that, I mean, I got the catalog, which I love. I did a show about cemeteries, so for me this is very touchy. I did a show in Paris a few years ago. It was about how a show can look like a cemetery. So when they sent me this show, this catalog, I was like, that's funny. But why I'm saying this, because there was also, I really see everything as a chapter of something bigger. So
we're going to have just a couple questions. I wanted to say that the back of the last catalog, we put in a family photo from 1974. There's Ari and Serena, and I can tell you they're 6 and 4 years old. They're on the couch, they're each reading the thing that they're interested in. With Ari, it was electronics. And behind them is an Ellsworth Kelly. And it was only a few years ago that Serena, who's been a lawyer over 25 years now, said to us, "Do you know I was never allowed to have parties in our house?" And I thought, I didn't think about that, but of course not. You touched that Ellsworth Kelly. And Moma wanted to borrow it for Kelly's 90th birthday show 5.5 years ago. Just the 14 paintings we looked at from 1970-71. I just said, I'm not lending it. It doesn't have a fingerprint until Ellsworth called us. And you have to do that. You have a couple more questions. Maybe Liberty, you want to add? Please, something.
No, I think this was terrific. Maybe Omar or Nicola have any closing comments tonight?
Oh, here's a question.
I have a question for the curators. When you're curating a show, does your personal aesthetic get in the way? Like, if say there's a theme, do you find that you might put something in you don't really, it's not your aesthetic, or how much of it is your aesthetic going into the choosing?
I think because we kind of, as I mentioned before, we kind of come from the same place. There were a few things that we probably, but we both understood they were important, and there were many things that we both agreed. And I think because we come from similar sort of, from a similar place. It could have been different if, let's say, if he or I or Nicola and I were working with a curator that perhaps is more institutional, or, you know, I don't know.
It's so hard to tell you what is my personal aesthetic. This is something I wouldn't know where to start. So it's hard for me to answer this question because I hope I don't have a personal aesthetic. I really do not wish this for myself and not to my worst enemy. To have a personal aesthetic, that's when it ends, you know? So we need to feel and we need to be connected, and then maybe some other people will say, but you did this, and I will say, okay, but that it's always an afterthought. I think I really believe that we were so, it was such a playful, you know, the moment we had, I felt even for my, I always do it on my own, that the moment I see a pattern, I need to break it, and then I did it within the forum. So that's...
I think it has to do also with a particular criteria, and more than an aesthetic is this understanding a certain thing that is not even translated into art. It's this thing, whatever it is, you know.
Well, we had a total bias in everything we selected. And that, I always say that's our job. Our job is, if we can come up with the money, to pick that piece we absolutely believe in. And that's it. And we never deviated from that. And then we had the great adventure with these two guys to watch the process. And I can't speak for most of what they did, except there were things, they had to make choices. And I found it really educational watching them make choices. And I'm happy with the outcome.
But it's also, just to be clear, I stand completely behind the personal. Just personal plus aesthetic. This is, you know, but the personal, I mean, I think that's rarely not present there. I think, going back to your question, I think it's quite impossible to be not personal, we try to mediate and kind of filter it in several different ways. And I think certain contexts like forces us to filter our personal, our being personal more than others. I think here we have the luck to be personal. I think just because the collection is personal. But I think the combination, that's where things get a little, so.
I'm just going to end soon. I think, I look at this now as it's a piece of our history, 55 years, which is incredible doing this. But I feel like we're young, and partly because we still walk up 6 flights to artist studios anytime, and the thrill of seeing something yet again that so engages us, like that piece up front with this mirror that looks at your face and does a readout. This wasn't possible 10 or 20 years ago. Or the bread box. When we see something, it's so engaging that just knowing we're going to come around the corner someday and it's going to happen. And I think, we're thrilled that you guys agreed to do this. I thank you from the bottom of our hearts.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And now we have food and drink. There's a reception in the back. You're welcome